What happens when a beloved British actor walks into what should be a friendly daytime chat and finds himself face-to-face with one of television's most notoriously difficult hosts? It only took 35 seconds for Denise Welch to reveal her true colors and turn what was meant to be a lighthearted interview into an absolute car crash that would leave Colin Firth Markle stunned, the audience gasping, and her fellow panelists scrambling to salvage what was left of their show's reputation. The Loose Women studio buzzed with its usual energy as the cameras rolled for another Wednesday afternoon episode. Sitting around the iconic table were the show's regular faces, Denise Welch, positioned in her usual spot as the day's anchor, alongside panelists Nadia Sawalha, Kay Adams, and Linda Robson. The lighting was perfect, the audience was warmed up, and everything seemed set for another successful show. But today's guest was special. Colin Firth Markle had agreed to appear on the program to discuss his latest film project, a deeply personal drama about family reconciliation that had already earned critical acclaim across Europe. Known for his thoughtful approach to interviews and his genuine warmth with fans, Colin was the kind of guest that talk shows dream of hosting. His publicist had specifically requested Loose Women because of its reputation for creating a comfortable, conversational atmosphere where celebrities could show their more relaxed, authentic selves. As Colin settled into the guest chair, adjusting his navy blue sweater and offering that characteristic gentle smile to the cameras, there was no indication of the storm that was about to erupt. The audience applauded warmly, clearly delighted to see one of Britain's most respected actors up close. Nadia Sawalha beamed at him from across the table, while Kay Adams shuffled through her notes with obvious excitement. Even Linda Robson, usually more reserved with guests she didn't know personally, seemed genuinely pleased to have him there. Denise Welch, however, wore an expression that was harder to read. Perhaps it was the way she kept glancing at her phone during the commercial break, or the slight tension in her shoulders as she prepared to begin the interview, but something felt different about her usual on-screen presence. The production team had briefed all the panelists about Colin's preferred topics of conversation, his current projects, and the gentle, respectful tone he appreciated in interviews. These guidelines weren't unusual. Most A-list celebrities had similar requests, and the Loose Women team was experienced in creating the right atmosphere for their guests. "Welcome back to Loose Women," Denise began, her voice carrying its familiar authoritative tone as the cameras focused on her. "We're absolutely thrilled to have Colin Firth Markle with us today." "Colin, thank you so much for joining us." Colin's response was immediate and genuine, his eyes lighting up as he leaned slightly forward in his chair. "Thank you for having me, Denise. It's lovely to be here with all of you. I've been watching Loose Women for years, and I've always admired how you create such an honest, open space for conversation." The comment was perfectly innocent, the kind of gracious opening remark that guests often made to establish rapport with their hosts. But something in Denise's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Her smile remained in place, but her eyes narrowed just slightly. And when she spoke again, there was an edge to her voice that hadn't been there moments before. "Oh, have you really?" she replied. And while her words could have been taken as pleased surprise, her tone suggested something else entirely. "That's interesting. I suppose you've seen how we handle things here then." Nadia Sawalha, clearly picking up on the unusual tension, jumped in quickly with a bright smile. "Colin, we're all so excited about your new film. Can you tell us what drew you to this particular story?" Colin's face immediately brightened as he turned toward Nadia, clearly grateful for the redirect to safer ground. "Absolutely. The script came to me at a time when I was really thinking about the complexity of family relationships, about how we navigate forgiveness and understanding, even when people have hurt us deeply. The character I play is someone who has to confront his own assumptions about his family, and I found that incredibly compelling." As Colin spoke, his passion for the project was evident in every word. His hands moved expressively as he described the emotional journey of his character, and his voice took on the thoughtful, measured quality that had made him such a respected figure in the industry. The audience was clearly captivated, hanging on every word as he painted a picture of a story that was both deeply personal and universally relatable. But Denise wasn't finished. As Colin continued to discuss the film's themes of reconciliation and second chances, she began tapping her pen against her notes, the small sound creating an annoying counterpoint to his thoughtful explanation. When he paused to take a breath, she pounced. "That's all very noble," she interrupted, her voice cutting through the comfortable atmosphere like a knife. "But let's be honest here, Colin. Isn't this just another vanity project for actors who want to appear more serious than they actually are?" The question hit the studio like a physical blow. Colin's expression shifted from surprised confusion to quiet hurt, while the other panelists exchanged shocked glances. The audience, which had been murmuring appreciatively during Colin's explanation, fell into stunned silence. This wasn't the playful challenging that Loose Women was known for. This was something else entirely. Kay Adams cleared her throat, clearly trying to restore some balance to the conversation. "I think what Denise might be getting at," she began diplomatically, but Colin raised his hand gently, his expression still kind despite the unnecessary attack. "No, it's all right, Kay," he said softly, his voice maintaining its characteristic warmth even as hurt flickered in his eyes. "I understand that sometimes people are skeptical of actors' motivations, but I can assure you, Denise, that this project came from a very genuine place. I wouldn't have spent 2 years of my life on something I didn't believe in completely." His response was measured, gracious, and completely professional. Exactly the kind of dignified handling of an awkward moment that had made him so respected in the industry. But rather than appreciating his grace under pressure, Denise seemed to interpret his calm response as a challenge to escalate further. "Oh, I'm sure you believe in it," she replied, her voice dripping with sarcasm that made everyone in the studio visibly uncomfortable. "But believing in something, and it actually being worthwhile, are two very different things, aren't they?" Linda Robson, who had been watching this exchange with growing alarm, finally spoke up. "Denise, I think, Denise cut her off sharply, "that our viewers deserve honesty from their guests, not just pretty speeches about artistic integrity." The studio had become so tense that even the cameramen seemed uncertain where to focus. Colin sat back in his chair, clearly taken aback by the hostility he was facing. This wasn't the warm, conversational interview he'd been promised. This felt more like an ambush. "I'm not sure what you want from me, Denise," Colin said finally, his voice still controlled but with a slight tremor that revealed how the attack was affecting him. "I came here to talk about a film I'm proud of, to share something I thought your viewers might find interesting. If you'd prefer to discuss something else..." "What I'd prefer," Denise snapped, her mask of professionalism finally dropping completely, "is guests who don't come on my show thinking they can dictate how the conversation goes." The words hung in the air like poison, and the effect on everyone in the studio was immediate and devastating. Colin's face went pale, not with anger but with genuine shock at the unprovoked cruelty of the attack. This wasn't television anymore. This was personal, and everyone could feel it. Nadia Sawalha's mouth fell open in disbelief. In all her years on the show, she had never witnessed such blatant hostility toward a guest who had done absolutely nothing to deserve it. Kay Adams looked like she wanted to crawl under the table, while Linda Robson was shaking her head in obvious disapproval. The audience, which had been so warm and welcoming just minutes earlier, now sat in stunned, uncomfortable silence. But Colin, even in the face of such unexpected aggression, maintained his composure with remarkable grace. "Denise," he said quietly, "I'm not trying to dictate anything. I'm simply here to have a conversation. If I've somehow offended you, I sincerely apologize, but I'm not sure what I've done wrong." His genuine confusion and hurt were written all over his face, and it was clear to everyone watching that this was a good man who had walked into an ambush he never saw coming. The contrast between his quiet dignity and Denise's aggressive hostility couldn't have been more stark, and the audience was beginning to shift uncomfortably in their seats. "What you've done wrong," Denise continued, her voice rising now with an anger that seemed completely disproportionate to anything that had actually happened, "is come onto my show with your sanctimonious attitude, thinking you can just charm your way through an interview without being asked any real questions." Linda Robson finally found her voice, her usual gentle demeanor replaced by obvious distress. "Denise, please, this isn't..." "This isn't what, Linda?" Denise snapped, turning her fury on her colleague now. "This isn't how we do things? This isn't professional enough for you?" The attack on Linda seemed to break something in the studio's atmosphere. Here was Denise, not content with bullying their guest, now turning on her own teammate. Kay Adams leaned forward, her voice firm but careful. "Denise, I think we all need to take a breath here. Colin is our guest, and I'm the host of this segment," Denise shot back, her voice now loud enough that it was probably carrying beyond the studio. "I'll conduct this interview however I see fit." Colin, who had been watching this exchange with growing horror, finally spoke up again. His voice was still gentle, but there was a strength in it now, the quiet authority of someone who had witnessed enough. "Ladies, please don't argue on my account. If my presence is causing problems, I'm happy to leave. That was never my intention." The offer to leave, made with such gracious concern for the people around him, only seemed to infuriate Denise further. "Oh, how convenient," she sneered. Run away when things get a little challenging? How very typical. That was the moment when something shifted in Colin's expression. Up until now, he had absorbed every attack with patience and grace, trying to understand what he had done to provoke such hostility. But this latest comment seemed to cross a line, not because it hurt him personally, but because it was so fundamentally unfair. "I'm not running away from anything challenging, Denise," he said, his voice still calm but now carrying a quiet strength that commanded attention. "I'm trying to be respectful of your colleagues and your audience. What's happening here isn't challenging, it's just unkind." The word unkind landed in the studio like a bell tolling. It was such a simple word, delivered without anger or accusation, just a quiet statement of fact that somehow carried more weight than any shouting match could have. Nadia Sawalha nodded almost imperceptibly, her eyes showing clear agreement with Colin's assessment. But Denise was too far gone to pull back now. "Unkind?" she repeated, her voice reaching a pitch that was genuinely uncomfortable to hear. "You think holding people accountable is unkind? You think asking real questions instead of just lobbing softballs is unkind?" "I think," Colin replied with devastating quietness, "that there's a difference between holding someone accountable and attacking them for no reason. I came here in good faith, Denise. I've answered every question honestly. I've been respectful to you and to your colleagues. I'm not sure what accountability you're looking for that I haven't already provided." His words were so reasonable, so measured, that they made Denise's behavior look even more irrational by comparison. The cameras, which had been switching between faces to capture reactions, seemed to linger now on the contrast between Colin's composed dignity and Denise's barely controlled fury. Kay Adams made one more attempt to restore sanity to the situation. "Perhaps we could talk about Colin's upcoming projects," she suggested hopefully. "I know our viewers would love to hear about what you're working on next." But Denise wasn't interested in moving on. She was locked in now, committed to this path of destruction regardless of the cost. "What I'd love," she said with bitter sarcasm, "is for our viewers to see what celebrities are really like when they don't get the fawning treatment they expect." The accusation was so unfair, so completely divorced from reality, that even the production crew behind the cameras could be seen exchanging concerned glances. Colin had been nothing but gracious, professional, and kind from the moment he walked into the studio. If anything, he had shown remarkable restraint in the face of completely unprovoked hostility. Colin looked at Denise for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a sadness that was somehow more powerful than anger would have been. "I'm genuinely sorry that you see me that way, Denise. I can only tell you that it wasn't my intention to come across as expecting any particular treatment. I just hoped we could have a pleasant conversation about work I care about." The simple honesty of his response, delivered without defensiveness or retaliation, seemed to illuminate just how far over the line Denise had gone. Linda Robson was now openly shaking her head in disapproval, while Nadia Sawalha looked like she was fighting the urge to reach across the table and comfort Colin herself. But Denise, rather than recognizing the grace being shown to her, seemed determined to burn every bridge in sight. "Pleasant conversation?" she repeated mockingly. "Is that what you call it when you come on a show and expect everyone to just nod along with whatever you say?" That's not what he expected at all. Nadia finally burst out, unable to contain herself any longer. "He's been lovely, Denise. Absolutely lovely. I don't understand what's happening here." The intervention from Nadia seemed to surprise Denise, as if she had forgotten that other people were watching and judging her behavior. For just a moment, uncertainty flickered across her face, but it was quickly replaced by renewed defiance. "What's happening here?" Denise declared, her voice now carrying a note of something that sounded almost desperate. "Is that I'm doing my job. I'm not just going to sit here and let some actor waltz in and think he can control the narrative." The word narrative seemed to confuse everyone, because there had been no narrative to control. Colin had simply been trying to discuss his film and answer questions. The only person trying to control anything had been Denise herself, steering the conversation away from its natural course and into this uncomfortable confrontation. Colin sat quietly for a moment, clearly processing what had been said. When he finally spoke, his voice was so gentle that it made Denise's aggression look even more jarring by comparison. "Denise, I think there may be some misunderstanding here. I haven't tried to control anything. I've just tried to answer your questions honestly. If there's something specific you'd like to know about me or my work, I'm happy to discuss it." The offer was so reasonable, so genuinely kind despite everything that had happened, that it seemed to break something in the atmosphere of the studio. Here was a man who had been attacked, belittled, and treated with shocking rudeness, still trying to find a way to make the situation work. The contrast with Denise's behavior couldn't have been more stark. But instead of recognizing the olive branch being extended, Denise seemed to take Colin's continued grace as some kind of personal insult. Her face flushed red, and when she spoke again, her voice was shaking with barely controlled rage. "Don't you dare patronize me," she snarled, pointing an accusing finger across the table. "Don't you dare sit there acting all noble and understanding when you think you're better than this show." The accusation was so wild, so completely disconnected from anything Colin had actually said or done, that it left everyone speechless. Kay Adams looked genuinely frightened now, while Linda Robson appeared to be considering whether she should physically intervene. The audience was shifting uncomfortably, many of them looking toward the exits as if they couldn't bear to witness any more of this car crash. Colin's expression was one of pure bewilderment. "Denise, I don't think I'm better than anyone. I don't think I'm better than this show. I've been a fan of loose women for years. I specifically asked my publicist if I could appear here because I respect what you all do." His sincerity was so obvious, so completely genuine, that it made Denise's attacks look not just cruel but completely delusional. Even the camera operator seemed uncomfortable, unsure whether they should continue filming what was clearly becoming a deeply personal meltdown disguised as a professional interview. "Respect?" Denise laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and ugly in the suddenly quiet studio. "If this is your idea of respect, coming here with your prepared answers and your careful image management—" "I don't have prepared answers," Colin interrupted gently, speaking up for the first time with something that might have been mild frustration. "I've been speaking from the heart about work that means a great deal to me. I'm sorry if that comes across as image management, but it's just honesty." Nadia Sawalha couldn't stay silent any longer. "Colin, please don't apologize," she said, her voice firm with conviction. "You've been absolutely wonderful. This island." She gestured helplessly at Denise. "This isn't normal. This isn't how we treat our guests." The support from Nadia seemed to steady Colin slightly, but it had the opposite effect on Denise. The fact that her own colleague was openly contradicting her seemed to push her over some final edge of rationality. "How we treat our guests?" Denise's voice was now loud enough to echo off the studio walls. "How we treat our guests? Maybe our guests should learn how to treat us with some respect instead of acting like they're doing us a favor by being here." The statement was so backwards, so completely divorced from what had actually happened, that it left everyone staring in shock. Colin had been nothing but respectful from the moment he arrived. He had thanked them for having him, complimented the show, answered questions thoughtfully, and remained gracious even under attack. If anything, his presence had been a gift to the show, and everyone in the studio knew it. Linda Robson finally found her voice again, and when she spoke, there was a tremor in it that suggested she was fighting back tears. "Denise, please stop. This is awful. Colin is a lovely man, and you're being horrible to him for no reason." This simple, honest assessment from Linda seemed to cut through the chaos like a knife. Here was one of the most beloved members of the Loose Women family, a woman known for her kindness and warmth, openly calling out behavior that had gone far beyond acceptable bounds. But instead of prompting any self-reflection, Linda's words seemed to trigger something even worse in Denise. She turned on her colleague with fury that was frightening to witness. "Don't tell me how to do my job, Linda," she spat. "Just because you want to sit there and simper doesn't mean the rest of us have to." The attack on Linda was the final straw. Kay Adams, who had been trying to maintain some semblance of professional calm, finally spoke with real authority in her voice. "That's enough, Denise. That's quite enough." Colin, who had been watching this attack on Linda with obvious distress, finally stood up from his chair. His movement was calm and deliberate, not aggressive or dramatic, but it immediately commanded everyone's attention. "I think," he said quietly, "that I should leave now. I don't want to be the cause of any more conflict among you. You're all clearly good people who care about each other, and I won't be responsible for damaging that." Even in this moment, even after everything that had happened, Colin's first concern was for the well-being of the people around him. He wasn't thinking about his own dignity or his reputation or how this would look to the viewers at home. He was thinking about Linda, who was clearly upset, and Nadia and Kay, who were trying to salvage something from this disaster. But Denise wasn't finished. As Colin moved to gather his things, she delivered what she clearly intended to be a final, devastating blow. "Yes, run along then," she called after him, her voice dripping with contempt. "Run back to your ivory tower where everyone tells you how wonderful you are. Some of us live in the real world." Colin stopped. For the first time since this ordeal began, he turned back to face Denise directly. When he spoke, his voice was still quiet, still controlled, but there was something new in it now. Not anger exactly, but a kind of firm resolution. The real world, he said slowly, is where people treat each other with basic kindness and respect. The real world is where people apologize when they've hurt someone unnecessarily. The real world is where colleagues support each other instead of tearing each other down on television. Each word was delivered with quiet precision, and the effect on the studio was electric. This wasn't a celebrity tantrum or a dramatic exit. This was a decent man finally drawing a line in the sand, speaking truth with the kind of moral authority that comes from having maintained dignity under fire. "I don't live in an ivory tower, Denise," Colin continued, his eyes never leaving hers. "I live in a world where I try to treat people the way I'd want to be treated. I came here hoping to share something meaningful with your viewers, and instead I've watched you attack your own colleagues for trying to show basic human decency. That's not the real world I recognize." The silence that followed was deafening. Denise sat frozen, her mouth slightly open, as if she couldn't quite believe that someone had finally called her out so thoroughly and so calmly. Around the table, her colleagues looked stunned, but also, perhaps, relieved that someone had finally said what they were all thinking. Colin picked up his jacket from the back of his chair and looked around the table one more time. "Nadia, Kay, Linda," he said, nodding to each of them in turn. "Thank you for trying to make this work. You're clearly wonderful at what you do, and I'm sorry this didn't go as any of us hoped." As he walked toward the studio exit, the cameras continued to roll, capturing every step of his dignified departure. At the doorway, he paused and turned back one final time. "And Denise," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent studio, "I genuinely hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. Everyone deserves to be happy." With that, Colin Firth Markle walked out of the Loose Women's studio, leaving behind a scene of absolute devastation. Denise sat in her chair, staring at the empty doorway, while around her, the wreckage of what should have been a pleasant afternoon interview continued to smolder. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of the aftermath, as the audience sat in stunned silence and her colleagues tried to process what they had just witnessed. The man who had entered as their guest had left as something else entirely. A figure of quiet dignity who had shown everyone watching exactly what grace under pressure looked like, and exactly what happened when that grace met its opposite.